Good morning. It's good to see all of you online today. We welcome those of you joining us on Zoom and those joining us on YouTube. We do most of our sharing through Zoom, but know that everyone is welcome on whatever platform you choose. I'm Sharon Love with the OUUC Tech Team. We're leading worship from several locations today, so you'll see the service move back and forth between us. We'll also be using the chat box throughout the service to post song lyrics and to share from the heart. There's a new feature to our Zoom experience, subtitles. Zoom has added automated closed captioning, and we've enabled this feature for those of you who would like to use it. It's easy enough to alter your settings. Find the CC button at the bottom of your screen and click it to see options. You can hide subtitles or click Subtitle Settings to change the text size. This feature is imperfect, especially with translating song lyrics. Feel free to hide subtitles during hymns if they're distracting. We can expect some tech glitches as we continue to do all we can to optimize our connections. We appreciate the grace as we all remember it's about connection, not perfection. Lastly, I hope you'll find a candle or a chalice. In a moment, we can light them together. Thank you for your grace and adaptability as we all learn together.
Let's sing together. I have the sun beating on my face through the window here in the church commons, which feels great. Our song is hymn number 146, Soon the Day Will Arrive. If you're on Zoom, you can find the lyrics in the chat. Soon the day will arrive when we will be together, and no longer will we live in fear. And the children will smile without wondering whether on that day thunder clouds will appear. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Some have dreamed, some have died to make a bright tomorrow, and our visions remain in our hearts. Now the torch must be passed with new hope, not in sorrow, and a promise to make a new start. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Wait and see what a world there can be if we share, if we care, you and me. Thank you for singing.
Good morning. Welcome to the Olympia Unitarian Universalist Congregation online worship service. The OUUC community comes together in mutual promises and possibilities of our covenant. We commit to live out our mission to be a liberal religious community that opens minds and fills hearts and transforms lives. We're so glad that you've come here together today. My name is Rick Brandt Kreutz. I use he, him pronouns and help lead our partner church team. And so leading worship with me today is our minister, the Reverend Mary Gear, and Troy Fisher, our music director. I'm also joined by Crystal Kyer and Reese Dovey, members of our partner church team, as well as the rest of the PCT that has a special surprise for you today, so stay tuned. We give thanks to our tech team and the OUUC media specialist, Joe Saline, for providing technical support today. And thanks to Darlene Sarkala, our administrator, for keeping us informed and connected. And we're grateful to have the many hands that have helped make worship happen this morning. We welcome each of you to this celebration of love and wonder and to this congregation. After the service, we invite you to stay online for a virtual coffee chat. This is a chance to gather with a small group to say hello and check in. Each breakout room will be hosted by someone who will make sure everyone knows each other and has a chance to share. We will offer reflection questions to get the conversation started, and we hope you'll stay. I want to draw your attention to the order of service, which includes our announcements available on the website. Plan to stay after coffee chat today for our talk show, After Church with Melanie Ransom. Today, Melanie shares an interview with Bob Sundstrom. To participate, just return to the main session after the coffee chat break rooms. A reminder that today is the Fire Communion drive-through at OUUC from 3 to 4 p.m. Bring what you'd like to release into the cleansing flames, written in a piece of burnable paper. We'll collect them and put them in the fire for you. And you'll leave with a blessing. We hope to see you there. Next Sunday at 4:30, join us for the second COVID Cabaret, Vaccinating Rhythm. Troy and OUUC musicians are busy planning an evening of community and levity. Take a break from the news and come join in. And next Sunday, plan to stay after our coffee chat for our monthly Q&A. This month, the topic is Faith in Action with Sarah Lewis and Reverend Mary and some of our Faith in Action leaders. They'll share what priorities they've set and how you can be involved. There are many opportunities to stay connected in our community because social distancing does not mean social isolation. So please check the website regularly. And if you have any questions or need any help, please check in with a staff member. So now let us open our minds and our hearts as we prepare for worship. Welcome, everyone. It is good to be together. This morning and every Sunday morning, we join Unitarian Universalist congregations around the world in lighting a chalice, the symbol of our faith tradition. So please join me as we light our chalices together. In the darkness of this winter, may this chalice illuminate our way, a reminder of our freedom to think and believe and worship together. Free to find healing, free to find truth, truth that springs from the life within, the light that we all possess and share.
Good morning. Our opening words this morning are offered by the Reverend Eric Walker Rickstrom, titled, "The Purpose of This Community is to Help Its People Grow." If you are who you were, and if the person next to you is who they were, if none of us has changed since the day we came together, we have failed. The purpose of this community, of any church, temple, zendo, mosque, is to help its people grow. We do this through encounters with the unknown, in ourselves, in one another, in the other, whoever that might be for us, however hard that may be. Because these encounters have many gifts to offer. So may you go forth from here this morning, not who you were, but who you could be. And may we all. Come, let us worship together.
Let's sing together hymn number 1028, The Fire of Commitment. If you're on Zoom, you can find the lyrics posted in the chat. From the light of days remembered, burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and souls ablaze, when the hunger and our passion meets to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to a life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and souls ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meets to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then the promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful visions comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built on our courageous joys. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and souls ablaze, when the hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then the promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. Thank you for singing.
Our story today is a story about King John Sigismund, the only Unitarian king. It begins and takes place in the 1500s in the country called Hungary. Saying louder.
I am Queen Isabella of Hungary. I've just had my baby. My husband, King John, is away fighting. Hungary is such a sad place to live right now. Everyone is fighting. My husband fights with kings from other countries. Groups of people within Hungary are fighting with other groups of people. A lot of the warring is about religion. I wish King John would stop fighting and come home to see our beautiful baby. I wish people would talk about their differences instead of trying to kill each other over them.
Unfortunately, King John died just 2 weeks after the baby was born. He never saw his son, and little baby Prince John Sigismund became the new king of Hungary.
All hail King John Sigismund of Hungary.
Well, King John Sigismund was obviously way too young to rule a country. Kings from other countries took most of Hungary away from him and kept it for themselves.
I'm
Wow.
taking my baby to live in a small corner of Hungary called Transylvania. I will teach him to be a wise ruler, and I will help him put an end to all of the fighting.
While the young king was growing, the wars continued. In Transylvania, the followers of different religions kept fighting with each other. Queen Isabella died when John Sigismund was 19 years old. It was now all up to him to stop the wars.
What should we do? How can we stop the fighting?
One king, one country, one religion. Just as they do in France, Spain, we must choose one religion for Transylvania. Everyone will have to follow it, then we will have no more fighting.
I don't know. You know, my dear mother taught me that people should try to solve their differences by talking. I wonder, what if I invite people from different religions to my court to talk together?
And that's just what the king did. He invited a number of preachers to his court for a conversation about religion.
I'm a Calvinist preacher.
I'm a Catholic preacher.
Of course, the preachers are great talkers. They talked on and on for days. Sometimes they argued, but they didn't fight.
Wow, I'm really impressed with Francis David, the Unitarian. He makes a lot of sense to me. I think I'm going to become a Unitarian too.
Mike?
What? Oh.
The noble said,
One king, one country, one religion. I say we need not think alike to love alike. One king, one country, one religion. We need not think alike to love alike.
Well, I could do what the noble suggests and make everyone in Transylvania become a Unitarian, like Francis David and me. But one of the things I like best about Francis David is that he says, we don't need to all think alike.
King John Sigismund thought hard about what to do. He was still just such a young man, and he had a big decision to make. Should he demand that everyone practice the religion that he had chosen for his own, or should he let everyone choose for themselves? He decided to listen to the other preachers and see what they had to say. The Calvinist said,
I'm a Calvinist.
the Catholic said,
I'm a Catholic.
the Lutheran said,
I'm a Lutheran.
and the Greek Orthodox preacher said,
I am a Greek Orthodox.
I'm Francis David. I'm a Christian who believes that God is one, not three. Since I think God is a unity, not a trinity, some people call me a Unitarian.
So King John Sigismund made a decision. It was hard.
Oh, no, not that.
Just read.
I hereby issue an edict of tolerance, religious toleration. I proclaim that every person can follow the religion of their own choosing. No one shall be reviled for their religion by anyone else. Francis David, I invite you to remain, to be my court preacher.
Now, this is not quite a happily ever after story, sadly. King John Sigismund died at age 31 following a carriage accident. And after his death, Unitarians were not always tolerated. Francis David was eventually imprisoned for his ideas, and he died in a dungeon. But because of King John Sigismund and Francis David, Unitarianism took hold in Transylvania, where it remains strong today. Unitarians began with beliefs about the unity of God and also came to stand for religious freedom and tolerance. The end.
We came together in community this morning, bringing all that is in our lives. We came together in community this morning, bringing all that is in our lives. In this space, we draw on the strength of our community to listen deeply and hold all that we bring here with us. If you would like to send in something to share, please look for the link on the online worship page on the OUUC website or send me an email and we'll bring it into the service next week. In this space, we share from our hearts what brings us joy and sorrow and what brings us delight and worry, what makes us anxious and what makes us dance. Let's open our hearts to the complexity of life, our own and others. You will hear a drumbeat as we share today. It brings into our awareness that our individual hearts beat, and together we create the heartbeat of this community. Right now, I invite us to take a deep breath together. And let's open our hearts to receive the complexity of all that is in our lives and community today. Linda Witcher and Celia Witcher-Tobin share their grief for the loss of their brother Mark, who died last Thursday. Mark, Linda, Celia, and their siblings grew up in this congregation, and so ask that we hold their family in love as they mourn. Mark is described as a social person who was brilliant with machines and who remained connected to his family even through hard times. He is mourned by his 3 children, his siblings, and their extended family. Celia and Linda, we send you and your family our love and care. Samara Joldersma shares that her sister Gail died on December 11th. Gail had a hard and challenging life, and her death was tragic. Even amidst that, there was love of family. This past year, Samara has experienced the loss of the 2 people that her soul is most connected to, her beloved Tom and her sister Gail. In gratitude for Gail's life and love, we recognize her here today because she will not be honored in any other way or in any other community. Samara, we send the healing balm of community to you as you mourn. And there is a birthday to celebrate today. Today we want to wish a happy 83rd birthday to Walt Sonestal. Walt and Pat will be on a Zoom call today with their family in Ireland, enjoying the wonders of technology. Walt, we wish you a very happy birthday. I invite you now to share from your heart by entering in the chat anything that you wish, the joys and the sorrows and whatever else is shared from your heart. And as we take in what is posted, let us hear the heartbeat of our community and reach out our hearts in love and care to all those who share. I place a stone in the water for all that has been shared from our hearts. A stone holding the complexity of our lives, held in the water of community. And one more stone in the water in this challenging week. A stone for all that we hold in our hearts and that remains unspoken. As we move into a time of reflection and prayer, I offer the words adapted from the Concerned Clergy of Olympia Statement for Peace. Will you join me in a moment of prayer and reflection? We stand for peace in the presence of conflict and for love and justice in the presence of hatred. We honor the many names for God, the many paths to God, the many ways to worship God. For we recognize and affirm that the divine loves each of us equally. It is therefore our position to urge all leaders and all people to turn to the divine by whatever name for guidance during these challenging times and pursue peace and justice. For this is what honors the spirit of all our faith traditions. We pray for harmony in the midst of our differences, so all people may know the freedom of peaceful expression, so they may know their own inner worth and essential contribution to the whole of life. This is our prayer and our decree. Through our actions, may we make it so. Let's be in a moment of silence together.
Let's sing together hymn number 13, Songs of Spirit. Songs of Spirit like a prayer, breathing in the ambient air, singing in the morning light, in the radiance of the day, in the twilight shadows gray, in the brooding hush of night, dark or light or storm or fair, singing, singing everywhere. In the burgeoning of spring, in the summer's scented bloom, in the autumn's mellow glow, in the winter's ice and snow, shade or shine or joy or gloom, as the seasons come and go, bleak and bare and blossoming, still the songs that sing and sing. Singing, singing everywhere, at the heart of everything. In my soul I hear them sing, mystic music of the spheres. Songs that with my utmost art I can only catch in part. Broken echoes cold and bare of the songs my spirit hears.
Our prayers and meditations deepen our gratitude for what we know as sacred in our lives and in the world. Each Sunday, we express our gratitude by joining together in service to our community and in something greater than ourselves. The offering collected here does two things. It supports the ongoing work of OUUC, which is also supported by your regular pledges. The offering also supports an organization or ministry that serves our community. Today, our Share the Plate recipient is the Partner Church Team Fund for projects that benefit our partner church in Chișolimos, Romania. Last year, we funded several scholarships, a smart TV for the local school education program, and we helped our partner church restore their nearly 100-year-old organ. Great. So each year we decide on projects to fund in collaboration with Reverend Levante, the minister in Kisholimos, and with the congregation and the board there. We hope to sponsor several students with scholarships and other projects in this current year in 2021. Finally, you're all welcome to join our ministry team. Just let Reverend Mary or myself know or put a note in the chat. I know many of you are interested in going on a pilgrimage to Transylvania, and we are planning to go again in the future when travel is safe and when the time is right. So please note that you can participate in the offering by making a donation online or through the church website, or by texting the number that will appear on your screen right now. You can also mail a check to OUUC. Our community partners continue to need our financial support. So may the offering be generously given as it is gratefully received.
A brief history of the origins of Transylvanian Unitarianism. The Unitarian theological movement originated along with other non-Catholic movements during the Reformation era of the 16th century. This was largely the result of mass publication that was made available by the development of the printing press, developed by Gutenberg in the previous century. The availability of Bibles for a lay readership allowed people to read for themselves and ponder many theological issues, whereas previously any questions about God and the nature of reality effectively had to be spoon-fed by official authorities of the church. People quickly realized that there were no popes or saints sanctioned in the text, and this was the start of a revolution in Western theology. After Martin Luther nailed his famous 95 Theses to the door of a church in Wittenberg, Germany, many different sects arose in opposition to the Catholic authorities, who were broadly deemed corrupt for the selling of indulgences or payments to the church in exchange for forgiveness of sin. At first, these sects were limited to the rejection of papal authority. Over time, however, they branched out into a broader opposition to various doctrines that governed how ministers and people interpreted the meaning of Scripture. Unitarianism proper began as a rejection of the concept of the Holy Trinity, the personality of God, and the pre-existing divinity of Jesus. Such thinking had its origins in parallel movements in Italy and Poland, brought by Lelio Sozzini and his nephew Fausto. These ideas were later picked up and expounded upon by the Hungarian theologian Francis David, who founded the Unitarian movement as we know it today. Our present form of Unitarian Universalism promotes the use of the democratic process. I find it significant that the origins of Unitarianism extend from a form of democratic decision-making amidst historical change in medieval Eastern Europe. In 1526, the Kingdom of Hungary was invaded by the Ottoman Sultan Suleiman. At the Battle of Mohacs, the Hungarians were defeated, and their king Louis died during the army's retreat. Because the king had no heir, the Hungarian legislature convened a diet at Székesfehérvár, where the landed nobility voted to decide their next king. On November 10th, 1526, the majority voted for John Zápolya, a fellow nobleman. But the titled nobility, a minority of higher status than the gentry, insisted that the late king's brother-in-law, Sigismund, be crowned instead. The resulting dynastic dispute led to a civil war that lasted nearly 2 decades. Sigismund took the majority of Hungarian lands, while John held the lands of the Eastern Hungarian kingdom. The two kings reached a compromise in 1538, agreeing that whoever outlived the other would get the whole kingdom. John cheated, however. He married and had a son in 1540, bequeathing his Eastern kingdom to him. 2 weeks later, John Zápolya died. His son, John Sigismund, became the new ruler with his mother, Isabella, acting as regent. This did not help the dispute. Taking advantage, Suleiman invaded again. He declared John Sigismund as the puppet ruler of all Hungary. Very little resistance occurred, as most of the nobles' energy was spent. Before the invasion, Europe was in the thralls of the Counter-Reformation, and the success of the Islamic Ottomans was taken as a sign that the corrupt Catholic Church was unholy. Former attempts to repress the Reformation failed, since the popular interpretation was that the wrath of God facilitated the Ottoman success. In a spirit of unity, various national groups within Hungary convened their most influential noblemen to declare a union of 3 nations at a series of diets in the early 1540s. As part of these agreements, religion was declared to be an internal affair of each nation, Hungarian, Székely, and Transylvanian Saxon. Because of this, Reformation ideas were able to spread freely. In 1548, the Ottoman governor formally forbade local Catholic authorities from persecuting reformist ministers, declaring that people should be able to listen and to receive the word of God without any danger. These laws laid the foundation on which Francis David was able to articulate his interpretations of Unitarian belief. Francis David was a man of extraordinary flexibility in his interpretation of various teachings. He tried to broker peace between Calvinist and Lutheran sects. Although this failed, he developed a reputation as a peacemaker and became very influential in the court of John Sigismund. David became a pastor and later headmaster at various religious schools. He began publicly debating with more conservative ministers as he gained a following. In 1555, he delivered a famous speech from atop a large rock in Kolozsvár, during which he passionately persuaded the crowd that God was one being and only through unity could people reach salvation. His words were so influential that the crowd picked him up and carried him to the nearby cathedral, where they demanded he be made the chief pastor. He became John's court preacher in 1559. This gave him direct access to the royal court, where his Unitarian ideas took root. After organizing a series of debates, King John Sigismund was firmly persuaded by the belief of ultimate salvation through unity, and in 1568, a diet was convened in the city of Torda, where it was formally declared,
"In every place the preacher shall preach and explain the gospel, each according to his understanding of it. And if the congregation like it, well, if not, no one shall compel them, for their souls would not be satisfied, but they shall be permitted to keep a preacher whose teaching they approve. Therefore, none of the superintendents or others shall abuse the preachers. No one shall be reviled for his religion by anyone. And it is not permitted that anyone should threaten anyone else by imprisonment or by removal from his post for his teaching. For faith is a gift of God, and this comes from hearing, which hearing is by the word of God."
This high point did not last long. 3 years later, King John died in a horse riding accident. His successor was Catholic and passed a series of diets against religious innovation. To make matters worse, David had begun preaching more radical propositions, questioning the divine nature of Jesus. He was imprisoned in 1579 in a fortress at Deva and died shortly after. Although the Edict of Torda did not directly acknowledge the right of individual belief, it was the first formal declaration of the freedom of conscience in European history. This major achievement laid the foundations for freedom of thought and expression on which modern secular humanism would be based. It gave us the ability to make laws without theological scruples getting in the way, and that was no small feat.
Meg pihenni, meg nu godni, hosat jutunk istenünk. Meta hakbin, ujab erod, chak temnaled leheting. Binus feug, por bahatva, megre megve megnir godva, tekin link rad istenünk.
Thank you, Troy. We have lived through historic events this week. Not only the culmination of one of the most clear-cut yet contested elections in history, but seeing the Confederate flag flying in the nation's capital and a record number of deaths from the novel coronavirus. One of the values of history is that it reminds us that we have survived challenging and horrific times before. Risa's telling of the Unitarian history reminds us that our faith tradition's story includes conflict, broken promises, cheating, violence, and war. And yet, out of that conflict so long ago came one of the most inclusive declarations of religious tolerance ever. In a time when religion was determined by royalty and its observance was enforced with violence, King John declared that his people would be free to choose the preacher and religion that satisfied their souls. Out of conflict came inspiration. The freedom to worship in a way that feeds our souls is part of our nation's history too, but that includes conflict as well. Early colonies were established by the French Protestants and Spanish Catholics, and that led to war between them. The sacred practices of the native peoples were not recognized by colonizers at all, let alone tolerated. And the Puritans fled religious persecution in Europe, seeking a new place to practice their faith, but set up their religion as the only one allowed in the early settlements. It took the radical act of Roger Williams, the founder of Rhode Island in 1635, to create the first colony with no prescribed religion, and that welcomed all, or most anyway. And more than 150 years later, James Madison would draft the First Amendment to the Constitution that provided protection for individual liberties that included freedom of religion. The founders were rightly concerned about the power of the state to impose and enforce religious practice. The history of religion is full of stories of abuses when the state and the church joined their power. While religious belief can be a driving force for justice and peace, they can also be used to justify oppression and violence. The events of this past Wednesday were just the most recent example of sacred ideals and figures being used to justify violence. There have been challenges and interpretations of the First Amendment freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble, freedom of religion. and we have not always lived up to the tolerance we espouse. The history of Joseph Smith and the Mormon faith is one story of persecution of believers in a particular religion. Discrimination against those who are Catholic, Jewish, Seventh-day Adventist, Muslim, and others is also present historically and now. It is one thing to declare religious freedom. It is another thing to practice it. We tend to focus, in this country in particular, we focus on our own freedoms, our right to do or say whatever we want. The Constitution affirms our individual rights to religious freedom. And yet there are limits to our freedoms. There always are. For example, although we have broad freedom of speech that even protects some hate speech, we cannot say something that incites violence or retaliation to the recipient. Sometimes UUUs say that because we have no required creed, you can believe whatever you want and be a UU. That is not true. There are limits to the practice of our faith tradition. And that is a sermon for another day. We humans are always testing limits. I know this to be true in my own life, and I notice that we are wrestling with this as a nation. What are the limits on our freedoms? The tension between individual and communal freedoms has been tested most recently as wearing masks in the pandemic was made a political issue by those in power. The president and others claimed that public health orders to wear masks, stay home when possible, use distancing, all of these were illegal infringements on individual freedoms and abuses of government power. Some religious leaders argued that restrictions on gathering in religious settings was an unconstitutional limit on religious freedom, taking this challenge to the Supreme Court. The court ruled that restrictions on religious gatherings cannot be more restrictive than other gatherings, but did not say that no limits were allowed. There is no doubt that the pandemic restrictions have limited our individual freedoms. We have all lived with those restrictions these past 10 months. Unitarian Universalists, including OUUC, have chosen to limit our gathering in order to protect each other, especially the most vulnerable among us. We have acknowledged and accepted the limits on our individual freedoms in order to protect the common good. As we wrestle with the limits of freedom, the question that I keep coming back to is, what are the responsibilities that come with freedom? Those who serve or who have served in the military remind us that freedom isn't free, meaning that some sacrifice in order to protect our freedoms. I believe that some of us, those of us with privilege in particular, are called to sacrifice our individual freedoms to protect the freedoms of others. Or as James Baldwin puts it, we can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist. This past week, we have witnessed more testing of the limits of freedom. We are asking about the responsibilities of our leaders to speak truth and denounce violence. We affirm that freedom of assembly does not include domestic terrorism and desecration of the property of we, the people. We saw once again and so clearly the effects of centuries of racism and a culture of white supremacy. The fourth and fifth of our 7 principles, our 7 Unitarian Universalist principles, say that we affirm and promote a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large. In these, I hear a recognition of the tension and balance needed between our individual freedom and our obligations to each other. We are free to explore, and in our search for meaning, we have the responsibility to others in choosing the means by which we search. We bring our own conscience to our deliberations, and we use a democratic process to make decisions. The extraordinary history of our nation has brought us many freedoms. Now we are being called to explore the limits of individual freedom and our responsibility to each other, to the common good, and to justice. Those of us who enjoy freedom, those of us with privilege, have a responsibility to those whose freedoms are only on paper and not real in the world. None of us is free until all of us are free. We can thank King John for a Unitarian lineage that includes the right to question, doubt, and seek our own answers. Our calling now is to take this further to explore the responsibilities that come with our freedom, responsibility to our faith tradition, to our community, to each other, and to justice. The events of this last week have left many of us wondering, what now? Next Sunday, I'll speak a bit about how we'll address that question in our OUUC community. This week, responding to our spiritual theme of imagination, Linda Seltzer offered this quote from Jean-Jacques Rousseau. The world of reality has its limits. The world of imagination is endless. As we move together into a new year, may our imaginations soar with all that may be possible. May we remain rooted in what is real, and may our actions lead to true freedom for all. May this be so. And let's hold a moment of silence together.
Let's sing our closing song together. This is a beloved Transylvania hymn, Find a Stillness, hymn number 352. If you're on Zoom, you can find the lyrics in the chat. Find a stillness, hold a stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with essence, oh, the essence, let the essence carry me. Let me flower, help me flower, watch me flower, carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
Please join me as we extinguish our chalices together with these words adapted from Rhys Williams. Remembering our spiritual, courageous ancestors who forsook oppression with security to gain freedom with opportunity. May we go forth to master ourselves by accepting freedom with responsibility, by showing balance in our judgments, and by having breadth of vision in our deliberations. May we move in peace.
Let's sing together our unison benediction. How bountiful the blessings that surround us.